Welcome back to Creating Dementia Solutions. I'm Richard Pyatt. It's a Miles for Memories program, and we're glad you found us, whether it's on Access Vision, on YouTube, as a podcast. Click the like button on the Miles for Memories Facebook page so you're alerted when these episodes come available. We have spent 2024 making a concerted effort to talk about things that caregivers particularly need to know. We've also been focused on a number of things that people in general want to know about dementia, genetics, prevention, and things of that nature. We're going to dive into some more of that today with Sherry Sherbin from Miles for Memories, lead volunteer, with really some interesting thoughts about prevention. Hi, Sherry.
Hi, thanks for having us. I
Thank you.
Love it, what you do, so thank you.
Well, thank you. So this is interesting because for a long time, the idea, the focus, you might say, has been on how do we cure this? Mm-hmm. And when we somewhere along the way, certainly made the observation that it's going to be a while before we get there. Mm-hmm. And so what can we do in the interim that might be helpful? And Miles for Memories was sort of motivated by all of that. But one of the things that maybe we should focus on more than the notion of a cure is some of the things over which we have control that can reduce our risk. Mm-hmm. This is really interesting.
Yeah, several years ago, way back in 2017, the Lancet Journal published an article that talked about modifiable risks. And as you look at those modifiable risks, are they unreasonable? And they broke it up into early life for individuals, basically up to about the age of 15 or so. And then they moved into that midlife intentional target of about 45 to age 66. And then finally into later life in some of the situations that we could manage very intentionally to continue to keep our risk lower. And one of the important concepts out of that is that even though you could look at something in early life, that didn't mean that you couldn't continue it on, and would that have a greater impact throughout life. So as an example, in early life, they wanted kids to stay in school until they were at least 15 years of age. That was going to have an impact on reducing risk, interestingly enough, for dementia. We don't have to stop learning at age 15. In fact, continuing learning throughout your lifespan not only benefits you as an individual, but enriches you in ways where you might be able to experience places of the world that you wouldn't physically ever have been able to go to. Constantly learning, constantly is of a value, but the Lancet Commission, their particular piece in 2017, really just targeted up until the age of 15, and somehow 15 was that magic number. And but don't stop learning.
Yeah.
Right?
It really suggests that old adage, use it or lose it.
Right.
You've got to keep it exercised. Mm-hmm. And really from the early life all the way through, right?
Yeah. Right. In one of the courses I teach at the University of Olivet, we talk about some of the activities that younger students engage in that can lead to a whole host of other scenarios. Truancy can lead to a whole lot of other issues, and I don't need to get into all of those, but the point is staying in school, staying engaged, staying in an active learning state not only will help to reduce the risk for dementia, but many other life situations as well.
Broadening one's mind, particularly when we're sponges, I suppose.
Yeah.
Gives us more to work with and more to exercise.
It's great. And as the original published piece went on to say, we look at those ages from 45 to 66. We look at those midlife age, right? The age that many people are scared to step into. But gosh, amazing things can happen in midlife, right? The things, though, that they really talked about very significantly about trying to manage and keep under control or within normal ranges would be things like treating hypertension, making sure that different levels of things stay within that range. Good diet and exercise, but more specifically focused on movement. So we want to get people moving. We want to keep them moving. It is great for the blood flow. It is great for the oxygen distribution within the system. Get moving, stay moving, keep moving. Don't think about not moving, right? We know injuries and accidents occur, but head injuries are one of the things that will come up in one of the later publishings or updates of this particular component. But all of it is really important. Preventing obesity, you're trying to stay at a good weight for you, and whatever that might be. Smoking, getting that under control and helping our blood vessels to function the way that they were designed and not challenge them in that way. And a really big one is hearing loss. So if we realize that hearing is becoming somewhat questionable for us, we're doing a lot of humming and turning up the TV and a lot of cupping of the ears to try to get better focus on somebody saying something to me, it's time to probably go in and get your hearing checked if you haven't done that in a while. And the reality is hearing aids today are just tiny itty bitty things, and they are so phenomenal.
They are, and I hear that from others.
Right? You can adjust them from a cell phone and make that difference. But if you neglect your hearing loss, it increases your risk significantly for dementia. So let's manage it.
We're back to the brain stimulation.
Yes.
If you can imagine a loss of hearing means you're disengaged from some of what's going on around you.
Yeah.
So then the cognitive activity is different. So that's why that's so high in the list of things that maybe we can control that make a difference. Yeah,
so that social activity, lack of isolation, right? Let's keep that off the table. Let's get engaged. Let's stay engaged, which is why, senior centers today are such a great thing to have.
That makes sense too. That's the other thing that happens when you lose hearing is you also lose some of the engagement with others that makes such a difference. So that's pretty high on this updated list.
Yeah, and actually that was in part of that original list. It just gets reiterated as we go forward. So vision gets added into one of the newer lists and making sure that we maintain that. If we can't hear things, if we can't see things, our brain tries to fill in the gap, which may absolutely have nothing to do with what's going on, what was said, what we're trying to see, and what we're trying to understand in our day-to-day life. Just imagine not being able to see well and differentiate between a door and a door jamb, the ability to run right smack into one, to miss the step, to fall, which will then potentially increase our risk for, again, future falls, is really important. So maintaining that vision also becomes important. I mean, you can look at all of your senses. Your senses all have value for a reason. That's why we've got them.
Yeah. There's a few other things on this list too that are significant, and I don't know if you're ready for this one, but right up there with hearing loss, added in 2024 on the update for this is high LDL cholesterol.
Yeah.
Wasn't on the list before.
No. I don't know why not.
Yeah.
Right? As we look at the role that cholesterol plays, I mean, we've talked about, keeping your pipes clean, your blood vessels clean. If cholesterol is clogging the pipes, why didn't we really think about that one from the get-go, right? Looking at hypoglycemia and hypoglycemia and so on and so forth, trying to make sure that we work well with that, through that, and as part of that. And when you look at the role that vision loss plays, that was added to the 2024 listing of now 14, it has a 2% reduction risk by maintaining good vision. It doesn't sound like a lot, but when you add 2% in with air pollution impact, which is 3%, and social isolation impact, which is another 5%, all of these different individual percentiles begin to add up to where now in 2024, with the released update, we have as much as a 50% chance of reducing our risk for dementia all the way around. That's huge.
50% chance of reducing our risk of dementia all around. I wanted to repeat that because that's half.
Yeah.
You can cut your risk in half.
Yeah.
By trying to control some of these things.
Right.
And it's interesting because the midlife list from the Lancet here, the update, you mentioned hearing loss.
Right.
7%. That LDL cholesterol is a 7% impact. And then all the others drop to 3, 2, 1% that are still in midlife. There's still a potential to control these and have an impact. But
Right.
those two are the ones that are at the top.
Yeah, they are. So some of our biggest value impacts happen in midlife, right? That early learning is as much as a 5% risk reduction, but don't stop, right? Use it. And continue to expand your horizons, continue to learn new things. Maybe it's a matter of learning new ways for your body to move, learning new ways for you to manage your diabetes. Maybe it's a new way for you to learn to manage heart disease, your cholesterol levels. If you have the opportunity to manage them in some way, manage them. Because when we keep these under control, we also help to reduce that risk for developing dementia.
Well, and so we keep saying this. The mission of Miles for Memories talks about movement.
It does.
And when you look at these factors and you say, how can I impact these factors in my favor, that 50% reduction, movement has a lot to do with it.
It does.
There's your LDL
Yep.
at the top. Depression. Now, I'm not a mental health professional, but I've been told many times that exercise can help with depression.
Yeah.
Physical inactivity, exercise can help with that too, right? Diabetes, hypertension, obesity, all of those things that are listed as midlife ways we can reduce our risk are impacted by movement.
They are. Yeah. So
I got to get up and run around the room a second.
Get moving, stay engaged in that social environment. Friends make a big difference. And if you don't have any right now, go to the senior center. There's one near you somewhere. Go learn how to play bridge if you don't know. Play games, learn how to play pickleball. It's another great one.
Very
All of
popular.
those opportunities for movement that are there and available. Shuffleboard is another one. We don't really even think about that really heavily for a movement activity, but it is movement. It also brings in that socialization process. It also has an impact on mental stimulation. It has an impact on really just physical activity. It impacts all of those things, and you don't have to have huge movement to engage in those. And if you don't have a senior center, find a Y center, an exercise facility, exercise program that's out there for you, or visit with Adrienne every Monday morning at 9 and do your yoga.
I know people who do yoga and Pilates, and they derive from that tremendous benefits, including mental health.
Yeah. One of the things that's also very important and implied but not directly stated with some of the diagrams that I have sent to you is that when we get moving, when we get communicating, when we start engaging and socializing, one of the other things that we do, even with yoga, is breathe.
Yes.
You breathe in deeply, you fill up your lungs, your body needs that oxygen for all of your cells to function at their optimal capacity, including your brain. It needs oxygen as well. So moving makes us cause every one of our body functions to enhance their activity, which causes us to breathe a little faster. And if you're concerned, take it slower. You don't have to run the marathon in a day.
Which sounds like a Miles for Memories challenge program. That's right.
Yes.
What are some of these other things here in midlife that stand out to you? One of them that stands out to me is traumatic brain injury. Okay, so of course we're going to try to avoid that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's listed here in the 3% range in terms of impact. What do you make of that?
Well, the other interesting thing about any kind of traumatic brain injury, depending on what the cause was, falls can be one of those causes.
Sure.
Once a person falls, they have about a 25% risk of falling again.
Oh.
So we've fallen, now our risk increases, so we fall again, and our risk increases, so we fall again. It's going to have an impact on our stability, our mobility, our ability to keep engaging in movement that happens to be necessary to continue to grow in that direction. If there's an injury to the brain, some of the communication pathways could be interrupted. It could cause blood flow issues. We could lead to stroke, as an example. Any of those things that deal with a vascular related incident could very intentionally lead to a vascular dementia in particular,
Yeah,
as an example.
Sense, I suppose.
Yeah.
All right. Smoking, still listed here as a 2% impact. I have a perception that smoking is going away. I mean, broadly speaking, I even heard one of the news reports recently talking about the preponderance of convenience stores closing. And what we might call drugstores,
Yes.
closing a number of locations. One of the impacts of that is they aren't selling as many cigarettes. What does that mean? There's less foot traffic.
Sure.
So my perception is a lot of us have quit. But your point is, the point from the Lancet here is, it's still going on,
Yeah.
and it still has an impact.
It does. And everybody has to fill up their car with gas.
Yeah.
So just as if you were having the ability to no longer go to the corner grocery store, possibly, you can if you're driving, because not everybody is, but if you are driving and you go in to pay for your gas, you can also go in and pay and purchase any of those types of devices, whether it happens to be, in this case, smoking cigarettes, or it happens to be alcohol that you can pick up at one of those, or it happens to be maybe some of the food choices that might not be best for your diabetes or your cholesterol or whatever the case might be. So those convenience stores / now gasoline stations can truly still be a resource for some of that activity.
All right. And excessive alcohol is on this list as an impact in midlife, though it's at the bottom, a 1% impact, but nevertheless, it's there.
It is. It is.
How do you interpret that?
Well, excessive varies based on every individual. So when we start talking about alcohol as an example, it varies based on the size of a person, the age of a person, the gender of a person, the amount of consumption, the level of tolerance, what type of alcohol it happens to be, the percentage of alcohol in the drink that you're choosing to drink with, and how much of that alcohol you've consumed in a 2-hour period of time, right? So one glass of wine over an entire month is not necessarily going to have a bad impact, and depending on the type, could be helpful. But when you finish off the entire bottle of wine in a half an hour, that's a completely different way of looking at what's going on.
Yeah.
So it varies, and all of these vary based on an individual and what we're able to measure and how that ultimately is going to impact you directly. The best thing to know is that these things are modifiable lifestyle activities that we can have an impact on. Somebody may have difficulty with their diabetes, right? They may not even know they're a diabetic. You might have somebody who's a pre-diabetic or is completely in the throes of diabetes that is functioning relatively well and not knowing it. Until you go in and have your A1C levels tested, or you very intentionally start testing your sugar levels on your own, you may not realize that those changes in your energy levels, as an example, have anything to do with that. And what's happening to the impact on the brain by not having what it needs to make it or allow it to function at its optimal capacity. So rather than having it fill in the blanks, because certain things are missing or it's working through other things, can we modify something, or can we keep something within what we know anyway to be normal parameters for today, to have the greatest opportunity to live a life full without dementia?
So you bring something up in my mind that is potentially a factor here. We are such a literal being, right? We lift weights, we get big arms, we say, there's the result of what I'm doing.
Right.
When we're talking about the brain, we might not understand the impacts of what you just described,
Right.
because we're making do, we're doing okay. We might not realize that.
Yeah.
You've probably observed that.
Right. Oh, sure. And the only way for you to really truly know is to have regular brain scans. And we're
Yeah.
not asking people to do that.
Yeah.
But even someone who was not an exerciser and then over a 6-month period of time has gone from no exercise to now we walk 3 miles a day. The way that they feel, while they may not be able to give you numbers, they can tell you how much better they feel now today and how that's impacted some of our choices. And if I'm out walking around the block, then I'm not doing some other things at the same time, right? That could very well be putting me at risk. But I'm also going to throw in there, if you have a hearing loss and you're not doing anything about it, or a vision loss and you're not doing anything about it, and you're out doing that same walk, in my neighborhood, you might step in a pothole. Or you might not hear somebody honking at you from behind,
Yeah.
right? So, we want to keep on top of those. Or maybe we are driving today and we might not hear a siren that goes in front of us, as an example. We may not see someone who is unintentionally fallen in front of us. So staying on top of our senses is really valuable.
Yeah, and a lot of reasons to do all these things.
Right.
All right, let's talk about late life. There are a few things in late life over which we might have some control
Right.
that can make a difference.
Sure.
What are they?
So one of the things that I've mentioned already is social isolation. So getting engaged with others, making new friends or developing acquaintances. Meet your neighbor, for goodness sake. If you don't know what their name is, it should be a good clue to go outside and say hello.
Yeah.
Right? And obviously I realize that some of it is dependent upon where you live and whether you feel comfortable doing that sort of thing. But if not, we have festivals throughout this county all the time. We have a county fair every darn summer. We have ways for individuals to come out and be amongst others to enjoy similar activities that we enjoy. I mean, if knitting is the thing that you enjoy, there's knitting groups. I mean, there's even a knitting group at the library, for goodness sake. And you can have a conversation with someone based on what you already know. You don't even have to create a conversation, because that's why you're getting together in the first place. Go to those places. I think about the holidays. The holidays for some folks can be very lonely. I understand that. But there's so many different ways that a person can engage and volunteer over the holidays for others that are also in that same boat. So isolation is one of those, and that was one of the tragedies, if you will, of COVID. So if someone was already showing signs or symptoms, exhibiting signs and symptoms of some of the different types of dementia, and now you're isolated, you aren't getting that stimulation and input. And while it's just an observational scenario, we had 3 times as many people that wandered during COVID that were brought back home from their bracelets than we had in the years prior to that, since it started.
I'm sure you've told me that before, but it socks me every time, wham, you say that. 3 times
Yeah.
the amount.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Which is huge,
Yeah.
right? So people seek people. And I would invite you to, in safe environments, seek out that time with others.
All right. This is an interesting one. Late life impacts, air pollution.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that stands out to me as far as air pollution is concerned, and even secondhand smoke that falls into that scenario
I
as
see.
well,
Yeah.
is the way in which our lungs process the air. Now, I am not an environmental knowledgeable person as it relates to this in particular, but what I can tell you is that if our lungs are so busy trying to just break out and break up what's coming in there, one of the things that we aren't processing as well as we should is oxygen.
Is the oxygen that we would normally be getting.
Yeah, and our body needs that oxygen to survive and to thrive and continue to function well. So a whole lot more can be said about that, but especially if you live in communities where air pollution is high. Fortunately, we are not in that type of a community right here in Calhoun County, whereas Los Angeles might be a little bit different scenario. So our numbers might not be as high in that realm right here. So anyway.
Well, the good news is LA is a little better than it used to be. I was there not long ago, and
Well, that's
you
good.
didn't see that cloud like you
good.
used to see on 70s
good.
television.
Right?
Yeah.
I know.
You mentioned vision loss. This is in the late life category, and in fact was added in this 2024 update.
Right.
And so somehow it wasn't there before. It sure seems like it ought to have been. But.
Right. Just in general, I've mentioned the senses a couple of different times, but, even our sense of touch, tactile touch, our knowing whether something is too hot or not hot, that sense of touch for individuals that gets into that social isolation scenario, whether you simply touch someone's hand or someone gets a hug, that's not included in this yet. And I'm bound and determined to see the day when that has an impact as well.
Yeah.
Right? So, but vision, again, if you don't see well, you have to continue to fill in the voids or the gaps to try to make out best what's happening in front of you. And it might not just be the mental clarity that you're missing because your vision isn't there, but also risks for injuries that might lead to a traumatic head injury, maybe picking up the wrong thing in front of you. So there are additional risks that could add to this whole process by not trying to maintain vision as well as possible. So, we have corrective things to do. We have glasses can be one of those options. Some people prefer contacts. We now have a variety of surgeries that can be done for anybody who might have a clarity issue or who wants to eliminate glasses altogether. There's lots of steps that we can do along those realms, such as that cataract lens replacement for individuals.
Sure.
Most people it goes great, not everybody, but most people it goes great.
Yes, I have heard that. All right, before we go, just a few minutes left. There is a notion somewhere in here that policymaking has a role in helping all of this. Help us understand that.
Well, when the conversation began about not only what can we do to reduce our risk, the bigger conversation around how do we help support individuals in making those choices, somehow it seems to always land its world in policymaking, right? And we look at what those policymaking scenarios happen to be. Some of those policymaking ideas that have been suggested might feel a bit too invasive for some people, because it feels like we're managing their health instead of allowing them to manage their own health. But one of them is blood pressure ranges, all right? So if you're younger than 40, it's okay for your blood pressure to be X, Y, or Z. If you're over the age of 40, maybe part of what we're doing as we manage health going forward, especially when we get to the ages of Medicare, we want to keep your blood pressure range within the numbers that have been predetermined, whatever they might happen to be. The encouragement or funding for hearing aids would be great, because hearing aids are not included in their Medicare component. It might be in an Advantage program, but it's not in the traditional Medicare.
Yeah.
So how do we incorporate the use of assistive devices of sorts, right, to allow them to continue to function and function well? That could be another policy change that might be made. Air pollution, secondhand smoke, we've been trying to work on regulating that for quite some time. Preventing head injuries by sort of targeting high-risk activities. So pretty much today, just about every kid who rides a bike wears a helmet.
Yeah,
right?
Never did when we were kids.
The things I did on the back of that bike, right? It shocks me today I survived childhood. But today in Michigan, you don't have to wear a helmet while you're driving a motorcycle.
That's true.
Does
Isn't that funny?
make sense? Right?
No, it does not.
But
does it?
That's a personal choice that particular person had chose to make. So, limiting the number of drinks that someone can have in a social bar, as an example. So, let's say I'm making up the numbers, so please don't get upset with me. But let's say Bob can only have 7 drinks, and maybe Julie is only allowed to have 4. I'm making those numbers up, but whatever that might be, that puts the bartender in a position of having to monitor who's drinking what, rather than just telling someone you've had enough. Because everybody's different. Again, age, size, weight, and so on and so forth, and consumption levels. Stopping smoking, which we've worked at putting all sorts of warning labels on, but we do use the tax dollars from the sale of that to help with prevention issues later on, right? So that becomes a little bit challenging. helping kids to make sure that not only do they make it through primary education, but then into secondary education, and make it easier and support our kids moving then into higher education beyond that, so that we can continually keep our brains active and reduce that risk. Encouraging people to be active, right? Get up, get moving, which is different than forcing someone to make sure they go run around the block every day. But, how do we support an active lifestyle with whatever might happen to be necessary, which in turn might reduce risks for obesity and diabetes and directions that we may take with cholesterol level and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Wow. All right, lots to think about there. But the main thing, if we walk away from this conversation with anything, it's that 50% thing. Say that again.
Yeah, so if you are looking at very seriously reducing your potential risk for developing one of the many types of diabetes, there are now 14 identifiable lifestyle changes that we could make to make our risk less. And what's not included in here are some of the other senses. The other thing not intentionally included in here is nutrition. By default, it gets there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a huge risk reduction. Huge.
All right, we'll link this in the show notes for this episode if you happen to be listening to the podcast version, and you can see these for yourself.
Yeah.
Wow, incredible. Sherry Sherbin, Miles for Memories, thank you.
Thank you.
Creating Dementia Solutions. Make sure you click the like on the Miles for Memories Facebook page so you see these when they come available, or follow the YouTube page for Miles for Memories. Go to battlecreekpodcast.com. All of these are around, so pick one of those, and we'll see you there. I'm Richard Pyatt. Thank you.